Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. As energy prices soar and geopolitical tensions rise, the global oil market has once again become a battleground, not just for economics, but of influence, diplomacy, and war. Now, with President Trump threatening tariffs on India for buying Russian oil and Moscow calling it illegal pressure, energy has become a weapon wielded on multiple fronts. And now to help us break it all down, we're joined by Petras Katinas, energy analyst at the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. Welcome to the program. Good to have you.
Hello.
Petras,
to be here.
The pressure is on. Now, India has a massive import number. 40% of that crude is coming from Russia. That's really jumped a massive amount since 2022. How realistic is this pressure now from the United States, the threats from Trump? What's going to happen next in your mind?
Well, first of all, we probably need to emphasize the mixed signal that actually President Trump administration sends when it comes to sanctions, because at the beginning they wanted to impose secondary tariffs, and they didn't decide what actually tariff should be. Either it should be 500%, which was proposed by the Congress. Then they start talking about 100%. Now, actually, last week they discussed about secondary sanctions, and yesterday we heard from the press that actually they are considering to sanction shadow fleet as the first step can be. So to be frank, it's the signals that President Trump administration has been sending for a while. It's mixed and sends pretty unclear message to Russia and India.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, I can imagine that some of these contracts, I mean, let's face it, these are contracts that are established for quite some time. I mean, it's not easy, even if India were to try to get out of them. I mean, it's not that easy just to cut all this off, is it? Or walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, well, mostly, first of all, we don't know actually about contracts and the volume that India promised to buy. What we know that some of, especially last week, what happened with some purchases, it was the state-owned refineries couldn't purchase crude oil from Russia, and that was based on spot market, not on the long-term contracts. However, we should be sure that of course probably Indian companies and some Russian companies, they have some long-term contracts. But yes, you are right that it might be some violations of contracts if the US will impose some sort of sanctions or tariffs.
Mm-hmm. Trump is trying to use this as a leverage. I mean, this week is critical in terms of that Friday also deadline for Russia to approach the table and come to a ceasefire. But at the same time, how much of this is not just about Ukraine and Russia, but also there's that trade deal in the mix here between the United States and India? How much of that is at play here, and how much is that being used as leverage here by Trump?
Well, honestly, in my opinion, this is actually it's a part of bigger trade deal between India and Russia, because to be frank, not only India is buying Russian crude, China does the same, and some European Union countries, Japan and other countries, which actually they already had some negotiations, and those negotiations ended when it comes to tariffs. So in my opinion, it's more like we should look into this threatening in more broader context, and specifically in the context of renegotiations of tariffs between India and the United States.
Mm-hmm. India has also pushed back at this, especially saying these are double standards, calling it hypocrisy of America to call on this, where we have still European partners still also trading with Russia to some extent with some energy resources. So how do we approach that one?
Well, to be frank, this is not the first time when someone from India told to Europeans that we basically the Europe is hypocritical, because we're still during the it's already third, fourth year of the full-scale invasion, and we still buy Russian crude oil, despite that it actually lowered. Only a few countries are buying from the EU. How basically to approach this? Well, it's basically between the U.S. and India. As from European standpoint, we can't do anything here. We just from European, we should end as fast as possible reliance on Russian fossil fuel, in particular on crude oil.
Mm-hmm. And how does this all work out in terms of, I mean, this is a major energy front as well. How much of this will eventually, I mean, we're going to have to involve OPEC Plus at some stage. How does this all fit into that battle as well?
Well, OPEC, actually, they have spare capacity. If, for example, we have the worst case scenario for all market, but the best case scenario for Ukraine, when Russia when the United States imposed, for example, hard sanctions on Russian oil, and Russian oil is basically banned from the global market. So the Middle East, and in particular OPEC countries, they have spare capacity to cover Russia's export. Mm-hmm. So if we speak about short-term impact, of course, always when something happens in geopolitics, there always historically we see some spikes. However, in the long term, having in mind that OPEC already increased production, even that global oil prices went down for the past half year, I would say that we would more save than threaten.
Mm-hmm. All right. And what could Russia realistically do in all this? I mean, if this goes through, it's saying that it's calling this tactic illegal by the United States against sovereignty. What kind of, let's say, means does Russia even have politically or economically to push against this?
Well, to be frank, when Russia started full-scale invasion and moved from Europe to India, when we speak about Urals crude oil, basically they actually are more dependent on India than India dependent on Russia. So when we speak about what can Russia do, actually they when it comes to crude oil exports to India, they can't do anything here. One thing they probably might do some retaliation in Ukraine or something like that, but it's hard to predict. But the main message here is that when they moved to India and China, Russia became more dependent on those regions than prior to the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. So it does sound like Russia will be coming out the loser out of all of this. So let's just wrap it up here. So what's next in all this? What do you expect as an analyst and your expertise of what could be the next step for India in this? Will they back down? Will they heed Trump's warning? What's the next step here as we close?
Well, I would say that at some point there will be lower import of Russian crude oil. However, I doubt that they will decide to phase out total Russian fossil fuel. It's the price is too good for India not to buy from Russia. And I would say that at the beginning, if after this Friday, there might be some situation, or after negotiations when India said, okay, we're lowering a little bit more our import from Russia, they might take some crude oil from the United States, from other regions. However, in my opinion, I doubt that they'll phase out Russian crude oil if no threatening and hard sanctions will be imposed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Well, look, I mean, this is something that we'll see develop over the next few days for sure, and it's going to, of course, impact global energy markets, global economy, but we'll see who walks away with a win and with a loss of this. But look, we'll close it there. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all your insights there. That was Petras Katinas. Thank you so much for all that this morning.
Thank you for having me here.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks here on TVP World, but much more coming up, so don't go away. Goodbye.